The next area we want to turn to is really the consumerization of IT. And as we've seen over the last decade or so, there's just a groundswell from the employees about bringing applications into the job, like I said before, and the inability to even know they're on the network or whether they're secure in the first place. And our next speaker is leading a company that has developed products that meets the needs of employees while enabling that information to be housed in an application to remain very secure. Proprietary. So I'm pleased to introduce my next speaker here with Aaron Levie. He's the CEO of Box. So thanks, Aaron, for being with us.
How's it going?
Good.
Great.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about Box. So what's the mission? Why'd you start the company? What's going on?
Yeah. So
there you go. You got a better.
Oh, thank you. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I don't get injured. So we started the company in 2005. Thank you. To basically solve this problem around sharing files securely, and both in our personal lives. We started the company in college, as well as in the business world. And what happened as soon as we launched the company, it was originally called Box.net. People could go onto the site for free and sign up for an account. And what we realized, we didn't even have this as a part of the theory at first, but what we eventually realized was people were bringing the software into the workplace to basically solve their file sharing and collaboration problems. And it was because fundamentally the vast majority of the on-premise software that had been created by companies that likely came from Redmond were just not sort of supporting the use cases of the modern worker. So, so what we eventually did was realize that there's a massive opportunity to kind of take what SharePoint was doing, but actually do it right.
How do you do that?
Well, what you have to do is you have to build a very different kind of enterprise software company. And I think a bunch of the companies that are up here today kind of are representative of that. You guys are representative of that, where you have to marry a lot of the instincts and trends and DNA of the consumer world with the ability to go work and deploy and scale up for a large enterprise. And that tends to be hard to do because there's a lot of contradictory things in the process. So when we build software at Box, we run into a lot of questions around, how do we control all of the data? How do we control what people can put in the platform? How do we, create, all the right kind of barriers for how people can use the product? And unfortunately, a lot of our definitions of security and risk come from the on-premise world, where it was about sort of controlling and locking down information. And what we have to do as a community is really figure out how does this evolve to a world where we actually want to have slightly more open systems that people can actually engage in and put their data in. And the result of that is we actually will, hopefully get better security, better visibility, better analytics, and then ultimately better control and protection because people actually then use the software. And that's been sort of our theory and what we've done now for the past 7 years as we've focused entirely on the enterprise.
So how important is that as a differentiator then for you guys? Is that working as a differentiator in that you're talking to enterprise folks here? So how do you talk to these people? Yeah,
so we work. Box is used in about 99% of the Fortune 500. We have about 40% of the Fortune 500 that are paid deployments at some kind of material scale. And so it's companies like Procter & Gamble and Eli Lilly and eBay and Schneider Electric, and so large global multinational companies that have realized that if they don't respond to this sort of trend and opportunity of consumerization of IT, that they're going to ultimately increase the risk profile of the security of their organization. And that's simply because if you don't give employees the tools they want to be able to use, then they will ultimately find a way to bring their own in, and then you don't get that same kind of level of visibility and protection. So we have found that there's a pretty amazing evolution, and we've been at this now 9 years, so we've been able to see this for watching the trend for some time. But there is a pretty stark change where we'll go in and we'll talk to a CISO or a head of risk, and they're realizing that they're actually going to enable better risk mitigation and enable better security by going with a sort of corporate sanctioned solution. It'll certainly validate the trend within the organization, but they're going to get a lot better visibility and then ultimate protection around their content.
Is that the number one sales objection for you guys, or what is that in the enterprise environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that the all things under the umbrella of security and risk is still the number one inhibitor to a business like ours, or really any cloud application. And it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of regulated industries where just simply the regulations haven't caught up to how we're using information. And that really puts most businesses in a bind where they're actually better to be out of compliance, but have plausible deniability because they didn't enable it, and then actually implement a solution that employees can use, and it's a corporate standard tool. And that's true of, for instance, the financial services industry, where there's a lot of regulation on whether it's FINRA or SEC regulations that just haven't caught up to how you actually share data in that industry. And so, I mean, I think if you were to follow every single, like current legal regulation in financial services, it would basically mean all of your data would always stay on premise, and it would never leave a firewall, and it would actually never be shared with anybody in the organization, which is obviously not possible.
Very secure, though.
Yes, it'd be very secure, and you'd get a lot of work done.
Right.
So, that's what's changing. And so then you go into a bank, and they say that they're not going to use any cloud, and they're not going to use any of these solutions. And then when you actually look at what the employees are doing, it turns out that all the data just is on Gmail or other kind of consumer platforms. And so then the question becomes, would you rather enable a smarter and more secure workforce and help evolve the thinking around security, or do you want people to just kind of do their own thing with technology?
Do you see people doing both? Like you've got the sort of the technology it's used for compliance purposes, and then you have the technology that people are actually use?
Yeah, I think that often it's about classification. So if you can figure out a way to categorize the different types of work that belong in different types of platforms, that also goes into solving this in quite a significant way. So we see a lot of organizations that will say, here are the sort of crown jewels of the organization. They can't leave the network. Here is the active daily work content that everybody is going to have to work on that is like truly about the productivity of the organization. That data is going to go into Jive, it's going to go into Box, it's going to go into other platforms, and that's going to be our daily, just flow of corporate information. And then if there's something outside of that that isn't classified and it's non-critical, then we're going to let you use other types of solutions, but we'll make sure that we're going to secure and have visibility at the network level around what applications people are using. And that's generally, whether it's articulated or not, that's generally the strategy that most companies have employed or are going to have to employ going forward.
Are you more successful in any specific verticals than other ones with this kind of approach?
I think that verticals where businesses where the value of that business, and this is ultimately becoming almost every organization in every industry, but businesses where the cost to not sharing information is incredibly high, where you actually get more of your value because people can access data on a rapid basis. And so, like as an example, I think we tend to think of healthcare as an industry that has been behind has been slower to adopt some key IT trends. They don't tend to be as collaborative because of either HIPAA regulations or just the systems don't enable it. And it turns out that was true, but that was more of a byproduct or a consequence of just bad technology being in the space for so long. And so now there's this revolution where there's enough tools that you can use in healthcare to get access to medical records or medical images from mobile devices. You can share and collaborate between researchers and patients. And all of a sudden, this is our fastest growing vertical because there's now a renaissance in all of the technology available to a hospital or a life science company that's actually enabling them to share more. So we're actually counterintuitively seeing some of the more regulated verticals being our fastest growing ones because they've been so constrained for so long that now there's this sort of unleashing of just all this change in how they're working.
So if you're making better decisions using better information, that's kind of the theory behind it. Do you have any more examples of like some real use cases you could share with these folks about people doing that?
Yeah, I think that any situation where the ability to centralize and extend information in sort of one place to many people, to many applications, to many devices. So in retail, that's all about sort of omni-channel marketing. In manufacturing, that's working with a global set of distributors or partners. In financial services, that could be moving equity research around, or we have a lot of customers in sort of doing private wealth management. They have lots of data that they need to share with clients. Anytime where information fundamentally is going to leave the network, or leave the firewall, and you want to be able to enable that in a secure way where everybody's getting a consistent view of that data, and then you have all of the analytics and all of control of that. That's where something like Box is going to probably increase the value and the productivity of your organization, and those are the markets where we tend to perform best in.
How about for companies that are not yet established, startups, companies that are young stages? Is Box a good option for those guys?
Everything is a good option for us. Yes, and we're a good option for everyone. The amazing thing about right now being a startup and a small business, and actually we certainly are in that category. We have about 1,000 employees. We started the company right at the point, like if we had started maybe a year earlier, this wouldn't have been possible, but we started right at the moment where basically every application that we invested in as a company on the internal side of internal ops, we could actually put in the cloud, because there were best of breed solutions at every sort of tier of service. So our ERP is on NetSuite, our HCM is on Workday, our customer sort of support is on Zendesk, internal engineering collaboration is on Jive. Obviously, all of our content's on SharePoint. So we at every layer
April Fools.
April
Right?
Fools.
Yeah, okay.
So every layer of it's Lotus Notes. Every layer of our IT stack is now a best-of-breed cloud solution, and it all gets integrated by Okta, and we protect the network with Palo Alto Networks, obviously. And so that's as a small business, we were actually more competitive because than a large business from an IT standpoint, which is very counterintuitive, because usually in IT, at least for the first few decades of modern IT, it was economies of scale, which meant that the larger you were as a business, the more you could invest in infrastructure, the more you could invest in buying the best enterprise contract with the best enterprise vendors. But then what happened was we got to a point where all of that scale actually limited the agility, limited the ability for the organization to be dynamic, because all of a sudden you now had cloud and mobile solutions that emerged. And as a startup, you could adopt those solutions for every single tier of application you wanted. So we've benefited tremendously now. We have, I don't know, it's 20 or 30 core applications that are all in the cloud. We have maybe another 20 or 30 others that people use in the organization. And we have a very heterogeneous environment. We see that as the future of IT.
That's great. How many Box customers are in the audience here? And raise your hands.
Okay. And if, for the rest of you, please email me, Aaron@box.com. Or sales@box.com.
I was going to ask,
to get a
maybe
faster
as
response.
customer support issues they want to take care of.
Yes, anything you want me to cover?
Just kidding. So you've got a number of customers here, a little hard to see, but a lot of hands went up there.
Okay.
Maybe tell what's next for Box.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the exciting thing that we see happening is we have this convergence of obviously cloud, of mobile, of new kinds of endpoints that people are going to want to work from and access. I'm going to do one tangent. Is that okay?
Sure.
So we just had this. This is something I'm very excited about. And this is not April Fool's. So last week we had our developer conference, and we actually so Facebook started doing. Facebook started doing some new innovation around satellites and drones and all this stuff. Has everybody seen this? Yeah. Okay. So I tweeted randomly that like every company needs to be able to have a drone strategy now, and I thought I was being facetious. And then somebody responded and they said, we're actually using Box's APIs with our drone, and I didn't understand what that meant at first, and we ended up doing a demo of this last week, and now you have drones that have incredible enterprise use cases around farming, around construction sites, around mining, where now you have aerial imagery in ways that you would never have been able to capture before. That data is going to the Box API, so it's being stored in Box, and we just launched a metadata API that now lets you attach things like longitude data, latitude data, the job site data, all of that goes into Box and gets stored attached to your information. So just the explosion of new sources of information that are going to make enterprises be able to just make way better decisions and be able to build completely new kinds of experiences for their own customers and internally. So I think where you're going to see us going is we want to be the hub for a lot of that information, and we want to help you take advantage of it and get it to the right people and build custom experiences and custom applications on top of it. So whether that's a drone or whether that's a satellite or whether that's just your mobile device, we want to be able to be that hub for your corporate content.
It sounds like you're kind of in a business where the users define for you a lot of times what use cases are. So what do you do from an R&D perspective in that kind of situation?
Yeah, so this is the other amazing thing right now is, has anybody ever worked with Documentum before? Okay, I'm sorry about that experience. So basically the history of enterprise content management, which is a sort of space we're trying to redefine, is you had to deploy these on-premise systems, very complex and rigid workflows. It was very expensive and very cumbersome. And so we never really got from an IT standpoint to the level where you could actually have all this innovation flourish, because all of our time and all of the organization's time was just spent on implementation, deployment, and just defining very, very basic workflows on these systems. So with these next sort of generation of services, because you have very simple RESTful APIs, you can, the guy who built the drone integration, that took him maybe 3 hours, and now you have the ability to create entirely new experiences because the building blocks of these technologies have become so simple, right? There's not only a consumerization of IT, right? There's a consumerization of sort of enterprise APIs where I can now build an application for the enterprise as simple as I would if I were building a consumer app, and that completely changes the dynamic of the innovation that we're seeing from customers. So we think an open platform where customers can build anything that they want, where partners can build anything they want, is the best way that we're going to see innovation in our business. And our job is to focus on that sort of core horizontal platform, continue to go deeper and build out more robust technologies from a storage, security, search, analytics standpoint, but then let partners and customers build on top of that.
Oh, you guys are killing it, very successful, like a rocket ship.
We're in a quiet period, so I can't comment on that.
Yeah,
but
I'll do it for you.
But we're trying to kill something, so yes.
Okay,
good.
great. Well, thanks a lot for
Cool.
spending time
Thank you
with us.
very
Really
much.
appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Thanks a lot.